This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show, everybody. It's Saturday, May the 25th, 2024, and I will be talking about coaching for teachers with my guest today, Tatiana, who is based in Serbia.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show, everyone. As I just mentioned, I will be talking to Tatiana shortly about coaching for teachers. Now, my guest, Tatiana, has 20 years of managing international projects, primarily in education, entrepreneurship, social inclusion, post-war reconstruction, and ELT, English language teaching. She's currently managing the British Council's Future English programme. Yes, Tatiana is a colleague of mine. And the program is implemented in 12 countries. It focuses on teachers' continuous professional development within online learning environments. She's also cooperating with relevant educational institutions and advocating for changes and systemic solutions in the existing continuous professional development frameworks for English language teaching and learning too. And in addition, she's a life and business coach, high performance team coach, NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming trainer, and mental health first aider. And I will be talking to Tatiana after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
According to FE Week, Sir Ian Buckham, the interim head of exams regulator Ofqual, is Gillian Keegan's preferred candidate to take on the role permanently. The role of chief regulator will only be confirmed by whoever forms the next government. The current Education Secretary chose to appoint an interim chief regulator for a year after Dr. Joe Saxton stepped down to head up UCAS. Sir Ian began the role in January, and Ms Keegan has put him forward for the full-time role, following approval from the Prime Minister. However, Sir Ian's pre-appointment hearing with the Parliamentary Education Committee will not take place until after the recently announced general election on July the 4th. It leaves a potential new government facing the decision on whether to keep the current Conservative-approved candidate or find an alternative. The Indian Business Standard News website explores the reasons for a drop in numbers of Indian students choosing the UK as their higher education destination. 21,000 fewer master's degree applicants have registered than in previous years, according to official figures. Anuj Gupta, CEO of Young Rads, said that Indian students are now hesitant to apply due to stricter visa regulations. Gupta went on to point out the financial impact this could have on UK institutions, as they rely heavily on tuition from international students. The article goes on to suggest that the British government has prioritised curbing migration over university student numbers. The article goes on to point out that many Indian students are now considering countries like Germany, which offers a combination of world-class universities, minimal tuition fees, and a low visa rejection rate. In Wales, the BBC reports again on measures some head teachers are taking to save cash as budget squeezes continue. A primary head teacher in Pembrokeshire is reported to be moonlighting as his school's caretaker, seeing to day-to-day maintenance, testing fire alarms and water hygiene, alongside teaching and headship itself. Many other schools are responding by cutting jobs. According to the report, the Welsh Government said its budget was £700 million less in real terms than when it was set by the UK Government in 2021. Councils have confirmed to BBC Wales News that nearly 200 schools have been discussing redundancies in 2024, with cuts largely directed to welfare and support services in schools. The BBC also reports on an open letter sent by head teachers from schools across St Albans to parents. The letter calls on parents not to let their children have a smartphone before they are 14. St Albans Primary Schools Consortium urged parents to wait until Year 9 at secondary school before giving them a device. In it, the letter talks of how the devices could expose children to a number of risks, and that whilst it was understandable that phones could give parents peace of mind, children's phones do not need to have access to the internet in order for you to keep them safe. TeacherTap's survey tool published data last January that suggested only 1% of schools had no restrictions in place at all on phones in schools. But the topic remains a cause for concern, especially as smartphones are now a feature of daily life for most adults, and that some children as young as Year 1 have access to such a device. Finally, a West Yorkshire MP is calling for children to be taught about endometriosis in schools. The condition, which can cause chronic pain, affects about 1.5 million women in the UK, according to figures from charity Endometriosis UK. MP Sir Alex Shelbrooke said he had been shocked by the lack of education surrounding the condition. The Department for Education said new RSHE curriculum proposals included the addition of lessons on menstrual and gynecological health, including endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and heavy menstrual bleeding. Sir Alex said both girls and boys should learn about all aspects of reproductive health. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
And welcome back, everybody. I would like to introduce my guest now, who is here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. And welcome in particular to my special guest, Tatiana. Tatiana, I didn't dare say your surname, so I would love for you to tell everybody what that is.
Hello, everybody. Warm greetings from sunny Belgrade. My name is Tatiana, and my last name is pretty tricky. It's Slijepčević.
Slijepčević.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you. So, Tatiana, what have you been doing today?
To be honest, I was catching up with some grocery shopping after my extensive travel for the last couple of weeks and enjoying peaceful Belgrade because it seems everybody is out of the town. So just relaxing, to be honest.
Great. And in fact, I realized when we were speaking before the show that you were in Brighton recently for the conference, the IATEFL conference, the annual International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language, Teachers Association Conference. I was there too, but we didn't coincide.
Oh, we did not meet. Next time in Edinburgh, then, if not earlier.
It's funny, but it's such a busy conference with so many people. That happens to me often. I know there were quite a few people there that I thought I would bump into, and I never bumped into them. A lot depends on the kind of sessions you go and see and where you are, what times, of course, because it's so busy.
Exactly. And the meetings you schedule. I missed a couple of colleagues, like my colleague Nargis Hajiva from Azerbaijan and our colleague Simon Borg. I saw his name on the list, but I didn't see him at all. It was, I think, more than 3,000 this year, so it was pretty packed. Yeah, I missed a couple of people, definitely.
And you were presenting, is that right?
Yeah, it was like pre-final forum on keeping teachers' motivation in an online learning environment. I presented together with my colleagues from Azerbaijan and Georgia, and the presentation was based on our online teachers community program for English language teachers.
Fantastic. And I definitely want to hear more about that and about your work as a coach, particularly when it comes to coaching teachers. But first of all, I usually start by asking my guests to explain a little bit about how they arrived at where they are now. So what about you? What was your journey to becoming a coach? How did that start?
First, I learned about NLP. So I completed all 3 levels, and the same academy where I was taking my NLP training was providing training in coaching. It's the Ericsson Coaching Academy, one of 3 best in the world. And it is very close to NLP, but there are differences as well. So after I completed my NLP training and got my license for a trainer, I decided to start the training in coaching, and I completely fell in love with the methodology. And all the techniques and all the knowledge that I gained through NLP training and coaching, I was able to see that they were working in my own example. So this is something that I completely believe in. And I had that probably very usual desire to share that knowledge and to support other people. That was how I got involved. And then soon I completed the program, which was at the very beginning of the pandemics. I started with my first coaching clients or coaches. And I believe that was the right time. People really needed and wanted some kind of interaction and support. So 4 years in, and it is going pretty well.
Fantastic. NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming, is that right?
Exactly.
Could you explain a little? I've heard a little bit about that, and I've actually attended in the past. I've attended 1 or 2 training sessions about it, introductory sessions. But I'd love you to explain a little bit more for those people out there listening who might not know what it is.
It is a methodology or even a science. It's pretty based on different psychotherapy schools and different kinds of knowledge out there from the business sector, from psychology, psychotherapy. And it's a methodology that helps individuals or teams to achieve their goals, to live in accordance with their values, not just to have aspired values, but to have true values that they live on a daily basis, and to plan a life vision and to live that vision, to basically plan and to translate that vision into actionable steps. And pretty much goes for the coaching, although the tools and maybe the process is a bit different. To me, it's very helpful that I have been trained in both, so I can kind of like mix them up. But basically, both methodologies are serving to people, to individuals, to teams, to perform better, not necessarily just in the business arena, but in their lives. And to me, it was a life-changing experience. I would say that I became more truthful to myself. And it is also about kind of like breaking up with the old beliefs that are not serving to us any longer, that probably were good and important years ago when we were children, when we were students. But when you are a grown-up, those beliefs and standards, they just not serve you any longer, and you just have to say goodbye to them. So for me, probably that was the most critical part of both NLP and coaching that I learned, because these beliefs, they become a part of our subconsciousness, that this is like and it's very difficult to understand what is actually driving our decisions and what is navigating us. But once you start digging a bit through different techniques, then you realize, well, this was very good when I was 5 years old, but now at the age of, say, 40, this is really not supportive to whatever I want to achieve. And both methodologies are very in-depth, very detail-oriented. And I would say that it takes courage to embark on that journey, because sometimes it's not easy to meet all the things that you believed in. They are just not good to you any longer. And it's very often connected to our parents, the way we were raised, our schooling system, which was all with the best possible intentions. There is no blame game. Like all these people around us, our parents, grandparents, teachers, siblings, they were doing their best with the knowledge they had. But at one point, you can just feel stuck, either in life, personal, professional, and then you just have to become aware what are these challenges and hurdles, and what are maybe some things or behaviors, even the way you talk, that it is not at your service any longer. So I would say that probably for people, it's the most challenging part, to say thank you and goodbye to all these very rooted beliefs.
Interesting. And so how is it different from neuro-linguistic program NLP then? How is it different from coaching, or is it an approach to something like coaching?
No, I would say that the final goal is the same. The ultimate goal is the same. The techniques are a bit different. NLP is more based on different techniques, experiments. There are different names, how we call these exercises that we use in NLP. I would say that when it comes to coaching, it's more of an inner process. It is more of self-analysis and self-talk. And what probably differs coaching from NLP are the questions that coaches used, and they are called powerful questions, and they really motivate people or teams to start questioning different things, to get more creative, to get more resourceful, to get more analytical. So I see that as a main difference between NLP and coaching. NLP per se is mostly focused on groups, while when it comes to coaching, you can have it for individuals and for groups. And last year, I also completed my program in high performance team coaching. And this is something that I use every day at my daily job and in some side activities that I am also involved in.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the difference between coaching and mentoring, because that's the two things that are often confused, aren't they?
That's a great question. And this is the confusion very often arises when it comes to the leadership and leadership arena. Mentoring is pretty direct and directive. For example, if you have somebody who is joining the team, you need to mentor that person. They need to have a very straightforward guidelines, instructions, because if they are a newcomer, regardless of their age, they really need to be guided through the process. So this is mentoring. It's really about giving clear instructions to the person so they can perform to their best. Coaching is probably for people, for employees who are more mature, so to say. For example, if somebody has been in a company for 2 to 3 years and they already have the foundational knowledge, they know the procedures, they know the processes, then it is up to a supervisor or employer to use the coaching as their leadership style. And this is about asking questions. And I work with a lot of people really across the globe, and I can still see this resistance and confusion. And this is something that I saw with my team, because very often, due to the school system, education systems in general, we are used to be mentored. We are used to be instructed. We are used to be guided instead of being asked about our opinion. And coaching is really about getting the best out of people, out of teams, using their capacities, using their creativity, using their knowledge. And once you introduce that style, whether with your children, with your students, with the people you manage, the needle shifts dramatically, and people are usually puzzled. They're surprised because they do not expect that much to be asked. But once when you allow people to talk and to express their ideas, their views, you can see the magic happening. Because when you have a team, or even team of 2 people, it's absolutely the 2 heads are better than one, and then you can have a really productive, interactive, fruitful conversation and discussion, which will definitely yield better ideas, better results. So it's up to the coach or a manager who is using coaching skills to know how to ask these powerful questions so that people can do their best and give the most of themselves.
Okay, that's a very good distinction between mentoring and coaching. I like it. So, mentoring is very much more of a narrow focus based on the maybe the job that someone is doing, but also it's about empowering them to have the skills to do that job. And coaching is far more about the asking questions and investigating how the person can be better, but in a much wider focus. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And it takes time to move from mentoring to coaching, or to move from being a mentee to being a coachee. It really takes life experience and work experience. I'm just thinking, if maybe 20 years ago someone had asked me a powerful question, I probably wouldn't have been able to give like the best possible answer. At this time, I expect my colleagues, my supervisors, whomever I'm interacting with, to ask questions, because once you have the miles walked and once you have the experience, you are kind of like eager to share. And I find when I apply coaching, we always win as a team. Everybody feels involved, everybody feels appreciated. And it's just like knowledge sharing and experience sharing, and we are always happier and more productive. And the team spirit is much better, and the team energy shares. And this is what I see as the best possible tool and approach if somebody wants to see their team, their community growing. Always ask the person on the other side of the table what would they want, what would be their view, or maybe shift them. This is a powerful coaching technique. Very often we are stuck in the present and we cannot see anything else. And there is a very gentle technique to move that person and say, okay, I acknowledge that this is the way it is at the moment. It's like a pretty gloomy situation. But maybe in 5 years, what would be your desired scenario? What would be your dream life, dream job, like 5 years from now? And that really liberates a person to unleash their imagination. Because, when we were kids, our imagination was wild. Everything was possible. And then, of course, when you enter some systems, there are some rules, there are some procedures, there are some limitations, and there are frameworks or boxes where we kind of like live in or move in. And we need to remember to use our imagination. And this is where you would see a radical shift when people start talking, what would they like something to be in like 5 years' time? And when they stop, then they usually understand that a number of these things are actually very implementable. If they cannot see that, then a coach would gently ask, okay, out of all these beautiful things that you painted for us, what is at the moment possible? And there is always something that is possible. And coaching is very much about commitment and doing things. It's not psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is often confused with coaching, just like mentoring or motivational speaking. A little bit of everything for sure, but coaching is absolutely future oriented. It's completely implementation and execution oriented. So when I'm working with my clients or my colleagues, from session to session, the first question that I would ask at the beginning of each new session is like, what you have done since the last time, because it is about moving along the way. And it's about acting quickly. So we usually end all the sessions by asking, what is the first step that you're going to do today to get closer to your goal? So whatever you do, it can be very minor. It can be like, I don't know, I'm going to call that person today. The point is that you get active and proactive. So yeah, I would say that this really does magic. And it's also about breaking down a big goal into smaller achievable goals and steps, that so that you are not overwhelmed and scared off. And when it comes to coaching, I think the best book and something that completely resonates with me, and I would say goes hand in hand with coaching methodology, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm not sure, have you read it?
No, I've never heard of it. Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. And I remember last year when I was in Oslo, when I met my flatmate from London. I did my second master's in London at UCL, and she is from Indonesia, living in Norway now. And we spent a fantastic week in Oslo, and I, of course, recommended that book. And she checked it out immediately. It was borrowed from all 25 Oslo libraries, and I believe that speaks volumes. It really explains how do you build new habits, and even more importantly, how do you dismantle the old habits that are not serving to you. It's very practical. I would wholeheartedly recommend that to everybody. And all my clients, they just have to read it. It's a must.
Right. And the other thing that I saw in your bio was that you made a distinction between being a life and a business coach. I mean, I'm imagining the difference is just with a business coach, you're concentrating on helping someone with their work, and then a life coach is all about helping them with the bigger picture, with what's happening in their lives. Is that right, or is it more complicated than that?
It is, and it is not. Why? Because these two fields are so closely related, they are overlapping all the time. And sometimes I would do coaching with a person who is, for example, having some emotional challenges or whatever, purely life related. Or on the other hand, I would be contracted, hired by a corporation to work with one of their managers so that he or she can meet the targets. But life is much more than that. It's much more than it's very complex, and it is much more than these categories and boxes. So what I do when I meet a new client, we do this exercise called Wheel of Life. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Have you ever done it? Have you ever heard of it?
No, please explain.
Yeah, but basically is you draw a circle or a pie. You divide it in, say, 6 to 8 pieces, and then you write different areas of your life that are important to you. Say, family, relationship, money, travel, work, whatever is relevant to you.
Mhm.
And then we look into each one of them, and then we grade them, and we say, okay, at the moment, for example, when it comes to my physical activity, I'm at 2, but in like 6 months, I would like to be at 8. So we kind of like grade it, and we put both grades, the current state and the desired state.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the pie, of the piece of the pie or circle, the client writes down the concrete steps, daily actions that they will be doing so that in 3-4 months they move towards, say, 8, which is the desired grade. And once when they complete this circle of life or wheel of life, then usually what happens is that people realize that what they thought it was a problem, it's not. It's something else screaming from that wheel. Very often people say, I'm not performing well at work. And when we kind of like unpack that, and they think that they need to work more, that they need more training, that they need more whatever, but it is purely work related. And what that exercise Wheel of Life shows usually, it's that a challenge is somewhere else. And many times I have had clients who wanted to perform better, completely disregarding their health. So it's highly unlikely that if you're having any backbone problems, if your neck is hurting, if your arm is like frozen, that you will be able to work like 10 hours and to be like high performer. So the priority then is to go for a medical check and to do some physiotherapy or to exercise. And these are, the misconceptions. This is how we kind of like delude ourselves, because we are so focused on what we think it's a goal and it's the solution that we completely overlook the key burning issue, like the one that if we sort out would move the needle in a positive direction for all other fields of life. And I think every time when I did this exercise with whomever, I mean, I have clients from Canada and Kazakhstan and Serbia, like very, very different territories, geographies, contexts, cultures, mentalities. But I would say that this very exercise, the initial one, it always shows this misconception about our own lives. And many people would say, okay, but why would I need a coach? Yeah, true, you can do it yourself, and I do it on a annual basis, like usually New Year's Eve, just to take a look at my past year and to kind of like plan what's going to happen during the next year. Rarely people would allocate an hour or two for themselves because something's always kicks in. There is something else to be done. There is somebody else who needs their who needs to be taken care of. This is why you need somebody to be there with you and to guide you through the process. And coaches are usually these kind of like monitoring mechanisms or accountability buddies. It's like having a gym buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Or, for example, if you're going to go for a concert, I don't mind going alone. But sometimes, if I have a deal with somebody and it's raining, yeah, chances are better that I'm going to go to that concert if there's a friend waiting for me. But if it's just up to myself, it's much easy that I would just say, okay, I don't feel like going there. It's rainy and I don't feel like leaving my house. So this is why coaches or mentors or therapists or whatever kind of external support, an external pair of neutral eyes, this is just necessary. So yeah, this was like a very short description of a coaching exercise, which I inevitably do whenever I meet a client, and they are very often surprised with the results of that exercise. So yeah, this is how I start my coaching processes with new clients.
Wonderful. Very interesting. I noticed that it's quite interesting that you say that it's usual if someone, for example, feels they're not performing as well as they want to be at work. So what is usually going to be happening there is something in a bigger picture. So they're compartmentalizing aspects of their life. For example, they're looking at work and wondering how they can perform better, for example, at work. But what you said was that it's usually somewhere else in their life that is affecting them and preventing them from doing that aspect of things. But I think it was quite interesting that you said in order to discover that, you are asking people to look at that pie or the circle and divide it into aspects and into separate compartments to then look at it. I think that's quite an interesting thing because you're probably then looking at or exploring the relationship between those different aspects of someone's life that may be influencing, for example, work. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And when they start working on, say, 2 or 3 aspects, then it seems overwhelming and it seems like a mountain of things that they need to do. But as they move on along this wheel, the things start repeating themselves. So then probably in each of the field, you would see that probably having more of the physical activities would help you. Being in a better mood, sleeping better, which leads to performing better at work, being more patient with your children, with your spouses, being in better shape, craving healthier food, and so on. So it usually boils to maybe 7 to 8 to max 10 steps that people just need to do on a daily basis. Maybe at the beginning, some bigger actions would be required. For example, if you haven't been to a medical check for ages, you just have to go there and to see what's happening with your physical and mental health. And at the beginning, like the coaching sessions are more often, and people think, okay, I will never be able to live my life without a coach. I'm kind of like, they sometimes say I'm now addicted to these coaching sessions, which is absolutely not true. It's like riding a bike. At the beginning, you need additional pair of wheels and you need somebody holding the bike, but you master it very soon, and then you are on your own. The same thing happened with coaching, and it happens very naturally. Like the sessions become less often, and then usually clients kind of like get silent, and then they just text from time to time. And I usually do not have these wrap-up sessions because like it's a very natural, it's kind of like looking at a kid growing up. At one point, they would not need a parent as much as they did. And for a coach, it's amazing to see their clients transforming, getting a better quality life, being happier, being more satisfied, being connected to themselves, learning how to set a healthy boundary or boundaries in their personal life, at work. It is a journey. It can be tricky, particularly because I'm a strict coach. There are always homeworks, but this is because I care. And recently, I was asked during an interview who should be doing coaching or taking coaching. And I said, everybody, because we all need that kind of support, or just taking a moment, looking at our lives and asking ourselves, where do I go? Where do I want to arrive? And I remember very often people would laugh at these typical interview questions, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I think it's something that we should be asking ourselves, maybe not every day, but very often, kind of like checking in with ourselves, quieting our mind to see, is this the track for me? And I would say that coaching helps kind of shutter these daily patterns, these habits, and that hamster wheel that we are often in without stopping for a moment. But the thing is that people are doing this, but they feel unsatisfied. What you need is just to stop for a moment and check in with yourself and look for the ways, or look for the parts of your life that are kind of like not working, and see maybe something or somebody doesn't need to be in your life any longer, or maybe taking a radical leap, like changing a job, moving to a new country, and so on. The point is to break these big goals into smaller steps and execute on them regularly. So in a year, it's like saving money. If I don't save at all, I will not have anything in a year. But if I save £1 on a daily basis, well, in 5 years, in 10 years, well, that's going to be a solid amount. So coaching is really about, as I said, being committed, executing, knowing the greater vision for your life. And there's this another amazing strategy which did miracles for me. It's called Disney Creative Strategy. I'm not sure, have you heard of that one?
No, never heard of that either.
Okay. Should I explain it briefly?
Please do.
Yeah, because I'm simply in love in that strategy. So I believe that the name is pretty clear. It is how Walt Disney ran his business. So he basically had three groups of people: dreamers, planners, and critiques. And they were working in separate parts of the building, and they would never meet. They were not allowed to meet. So dreamers, of course, they were dreaming, and this is how we got these, flying camels, talking mice, and so on and so on.
Mhm.
So, as I said, their imagination was wild. It was absolutely unlimited. So their job was to dream, to write down those dreams, and to pass them to the planners, who would then plan based on that dream how to execute on the dream. And then they would pass the plan to the critiques to have a fresh eyes on the plan. And the critiques, they would critique the plan, but never the dream, because dream was untouchable. So you can just play with the plan, make it longer, different, reshuffle different components. And then for whatever project they had a couple of rounds, dreamers, planners, critiques, until they would reach a perfect measure, so to say, to execute on the project. And the same technique is applied in coaching, but for personal or professional lives, and an individual or a group of people. For example, if it is about team coaching, they perform all these roles: dreamers, planners, critiques, and people love it. And it's funny and interesting to see when they meet. And it's important to have the audience. It's important to have the witnesses. So in a way, you really commit yourself. And it is interesting and funny to see how people at the beginning resist to dream. They're ashamed. This is why we do 2 rounds, so people get more relaxed. And usually during the second round, they become very wild with their dream. But the more you dream, the better will the results, the real results, be. So yeah, these are probably my 2 favorite techniques, like Wheel of Life, to get the realistic picture of your life, but also to plan a bigger vision for your life or for a company. And very often when I work with companies on their strategic planning, and usually it's about spreadsheets and some budgets and some targets, I come and I say, okay, please leave it, put it aside. Now we're going to do something completely different. And when you introduce something like that with managers, there's, as I said, a lot of resistance, because suddenly you're supposed to be a kid and say maybe ridiculous things about the achievements and dreams. But as the time goes by, people start realizing it is actually possible if you have a good plan, and if you're careful about that plan, and if you have concrete, actionable steps.
Interesting. So I think it sounds like one of the biggest hurdles to people doing this major change that may well get them out of the rut they're in and improve whatever they're trying to improve or would like to do better is this sort of feeling that change, there's a lot of reluctance to change, isn't there? There are people who feel that they just continue doing what they're doing because they've always done it, and they don't sort of have the dream, if you like, and that's what's lacking. They can't see themselves as being in a different place, or whether it comes to work or wherever. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many times have I heard that very sentence. I have always been like this. My parents have been like this. We have always done XYZ this way, and so on and so on.
So negative reinforcement, really.
Yes, sometimes it's a easy way out. It's an excuse because it really kind of gets you off the hook. You, for example, you come to a company and there are procedures which are really complicated. and which are time consuming and energy consuming. And then people would say, well, it's been like this for ages, but we can change that, right? That's one part, one side of the medal. And the resistance to the change, it's very, very strong because, we love our comfort zones, to be honest.
Yeah.
And our reptile brain is still so very strong and so very active because change usually means something unknown and something dangerous. And the moment there is something new on the horizon, your reptile brain would get that signal. Uh-oh, here comes the lion, here comes the tiger. Luckily, there are no tigers around unless you go to a safari. But this is what our brain is doing us. So we kind of like need to. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with the work of Elizabeth Gilbert, the poet and the writer? She wrote.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is
Yes.
how she describes her creative process. That the moment she starts writing, like all the fears are coming up. And then she would talk to her fears saying, I appreciate you, because fear is good, because fear will always signal if there is a danger, and very often it will save you, right? If there's like you're in a water and there is this big wave coming towards you, of course you will get out of the water. Or there's going to be this like little voice in your head saying, well, that street is pretty dark, don't go there. So fear is good and it's justified. But what Liz says when she is writing a poem, which is a new, unexplored territory, the fears start appearing. And then she talks to them saying, it's all good. I'm just writing a poem here. But it takes consciousness to understand how our fears are operating and to acknowledge them. To acknowledge their purpose and their role, but also being able to place them where they belong. So this is basically what happens in our brains, in our bodies as well, when we are faced with a change. So change, unknown, fear, run away if you can. So you need to kind of like push yourself a bit. And very often, if I travel to a new country, I would feel a little bit of anxiety because I'm not familiar with the airports, with the taxi drivers, and so on. But then I say to myself, but yeah, you've traveled so much. So this is about kind of like a process and a structure. So there can be some differences, but it cannot be that very different. But this, as I said, reptile part of the brain, which is responsible for keeping us alive and keeping us in a cave. So once we kind of like unpack this with people, and again, when it comes to change and change management, which is happening nowadays so quickly and all the time, change is really beyond the tremendous. It's critically important to have it broken down into smaller pieces so it doesn't look that dangerous and that overwhelming. And once again, coaching helps with that, while showing you a bigger picture in like 5 years, which is a safe distance. It shows also like the little steps, which are very often unperceivable or like easy to execute on, but it's also about the compound effect.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
If you do 20 squats a day and you do it regularly, like in a year, it's a significant number of squats. If you do none, the result will be none. But if you would be required to do, I don't know how many squats immediately, of course you would say no. It's like, driving. If you need to go, I don't know how many miles or kilometers, it's not possible. But it is like with that car on the highway. It is just giving the light and of like, I don't know how many meters in front of the car. So you never see the entire road. You just see a couple of meters in front of you, which is more than enough to get you going and reaching the final destination. It just cannot happen immediately.
Of course. That's really, it makes sense when you talk about it like that. So Tatiana, what I'd like to do is move on to talking specifically about teachers. As you know, this is Teachers Talk Radio. So I'd like to kind of hear more about your work with actual teachers and coaching. And the first thing I would say is, how would you persuade a teacher to give themselves to coaching?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Just a little bit of my background. I've been working now for about 15 years on different education, international development projects. For the last 2 years, I've been in ELT communities, managing a couple of big ELT projects. Prior to that, I was working with all subject teachers. And what I see is this mentoring approach. It can be primary, it can be secondary school, it can be even university level. Very frontal ex cathedra approach without sufficient interaction, without sufficient facilitation, and without having students at the very center, at the very core of the teaching and learning process. I know that there have been numerous trainings across the globe, literally, for teachers to move from that position of being a speaker, of being somebody who guides, of being somebody who gives the instructions, to being someone who facilitates, who supports discussion, who supports creativity, and who provides the liberty to students to do things not by the book, but by combining different knowledge and experience. And of course, you cannot apply the same level of coaching across different age groups, but there can always be a chance and there is always a space to ask more. Instead of giving the instructions, the teachers can start lesson with more engaging conversation. What do you think? What's your experience? Because what's in the books, and particularly nowadays with the IA, all the information, it's out there, and we need to go beyond. And I remember I was pretty shocked when I started my master's at UCL, because we had 8 hours of lectures a week, and then you would have a reading week, and then there was like winter break, and the lectures were from October until March. And back then I thought that it was not such a good quality, but all the books were available, all the resources, teachers, professors, they were available for consultations and for expanding beyond what we already had in the books. And it was, again, up to the students to be curious, to research, to explore, to play with different options, to create. And I see that approach can be very nicely applied at different levels of education, because children are curious, students are curious, and it's like from an early age, it would show to children, to students, that their opinion matters, that their thinking it's valuable, that their input is needed, that their voice should be heard out, instead of just having a number of children who would learn whatever is in the books by heart and just memorize it and then repeat it, and okay, you move on. This is maybe in some countries this is not the case that much, but in many contexts it's still very rooted. And I understand that, for example, if we are working in China and a class can be up to 100, it is difficult to have a discussion with 100 students. And it's easier for a teacher to stand there and just, talk and have kids being silent and sitting, which is completely opposite to their, say, physical needs and their energy. I understand that it is an easy way out, and sometimes it is part of the system. But still, each teacher, each educator has a freedom to ask questions from time to time, or to do more of the group work. Coaching, especially team coaching, is about making teams more, more directed to each other, relying more on team solutions, team discussions, instead of just having a number of individuals who are integral parts of the team, but in reality, they're all doing things by themselves. And recently, a colleague of mine, he said, for example, in Serbia, we have 2 students sitting at one desk. They are sharing a desk. And he said, in school, when you have 2 children sitting together, the desk is still divided, and the left part belongs to one child and the right part belongs to the other child. And what happens when these students are out in the market looking for a job, and when they join companies, it's all about the teamwork. So, for years and years, you are trained and educated to rely on yourselves, to do all these tests. And if you are caught cheating, you are done. Instead of kind of like supporting group work, teamwork, creativity, resourcefulness, facilitating the education process, because like information, like it's not scarce as it used to be. So I believe this is a paradigm that needs to be changed across the education systems. There are a lot of positive examples, but I do believe that we have a lot of work to do. And when you just go back to the beginning, to the very definition of coaching, is about support. It's about enabling an individual or individuals to give the best they have, the best they know. It really lands differently with groups, with teachers, with school leaders, with students, because when we talk about teachers and education, it's a whole ecosystem, right? From school leaders or principals to teacher educators, to teachers, to parents, to kids. So I believe this is something that needs a lot more work. And I believe it starts with school leaders, and it also starts with trust. And necessarily, teachers would need to be trained how to do this. And they would also need to understand the difference between mentoring and coaching, because as we were talking, it takes years and experience to arrive to the point where you can coach and where you can be coached. But still, if we were just asking more questions, and if we were doing more things, more tasks as groups, as teams, I believe that the education generally would just blossom. Um, so this is my experience based on working with different schools. And during one project in Serbia, me and my colleague, is a really, really small team, we worked with like 1,200 schools. So I believe it's a quite representative sample. And I have colleagues in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, and some other countries. So I would say that a very old, very traditional education paradigm is still very present. Maybe in some other countries, like, everybody is looking at Finland, it is different. But I think that has to be accelerated, considering all the changes that are happening around us and that are inevitably affecting education system.
Very interesting. I think one of the things that always strikes me is that a lot of teaching is focused upon the subject, upon the materials, upon teaching. In the case of English teachers, teaching English using particular book, etc. But really, you're teaching the people, and the students should be the focus of what you're doing in the classroom, for example. Now, I think there are a lot of teachers who do that anyway, but I think there are a lot of teachers who you hear about them covering material, covering units of in a course book, for example. And I think when a teacher gets into that dynamic, then perhaps they could definitely benefit from coaching.
Yes, absolutely. Because it is about gaining functional knowledge and marketable skills. But that is very hard if all your life you have been taught and trained in a completely different way. So I think that coaching as an approach should be introduced from very, very early age. So children and later people are used to being asked, because once you will be asked a question, you will be asked to give your opinion, you will inevitably want or have to gain some different knowledge, to go beyond. And when it comes to coaching and asking different questions, that can be very nicely adjusted to the educational context. You really support the resourcefulness, the research skills, because very often you would meet university graduates and their research skills are quite poor. And this is because if you are just material focused, and if you are just ticking the box so that you are sure that you covered all the teaching units, it is good in that very framework. You will definitely be able to say, I did it. But what is the result? That's the question. 2 years ago at the Education World Forum, I saw there was the World Bank stand, and they had some promo material about coaching for teachers. So it was like we had an interesting conversation and we absolutely agreed on everything. And when it comes to teachers, I think that it starts, or it should start, at pre-service level, during the university training. Very often when we talk about teachers, or at least this is like my first association, is that I would see like a person, an adult, and children. But we should not forget that there are students, undergrad, grad students, who are being trained and educated to become teachers. And I'm a huge fan of pre-service trainings, because you need to be trained properly as a teacher in order to be able to cascade that and to translate that to the classroom environment where you will be placed one day. So if you, and as people, we are, and this is something that is very, very typical for NLP, it's modeling. And kids do that. They are like, they model unconsciously, and kids do not listen to us. They look at us, they observe us, and they absorb, and they model, and they replicate. So I believe that teachers' responsibility is to be aware what kind of model are they putting out there for their students. But it's difficult to be a desirable model if your model was, say, not the best one. So like education, it's such a complex field, and there are so many levels of education. So I think the critical part of the education system is the pre-service. How do we train whomever we are training? This can be for like training managers. If they are trained to be mentors and just to give the instructions, they will not be able to apply coaching once they are part of a company or a corporation. The same goes for the students who are trained for the teaching profession. So I think that not necessarily a subject, but just like part of the teaching methods should be mentoring and coaching. And of course, coaching would be more and more applicable with upper classes, upper levels. But as I said, gently, nicely, it can be introduced and used from early age.
Yeah. It sounds like it's there are a lot of techniques there that a teacher would benefit from greatly in their career, and the sooner that they're introduced to them, the better, definitely. It's quite interesting what you were saying about students don't really listen to what the teacher says, but they definitely observe the teacher as a model, if you like, in the classroom. I used to know that quite well when I was a classroom teacher. Rather than telling students to read, I always used to be very obvious walking around the school or bring into class books that I was reading. And they would attract attention of the students. The students would ask me about them. I wouldn't present them to them. It would just be on the desk, etc. And that idea of, show, don't tell is so important when you can do it like that, in that case, for example.
Exactly. And when it comes to team coaching, even if you have the most brilliant, the smartest person in the room, that person will never ever be able to provide you with as creative solution as the team would.
Yeah.
And I think, providing that kind of example to students, applying a bit of team coaching with students would definitely yield in better results, better achievements, and it creates this sense of community, of team. Whatever you do, you cannot do it by yourself. You are we all are parts of the system. And very often when I talk about something which is not, say, part of the curriculum, or it is not a part of we have always done it this way, people in general would complain about the system. They would blame the system, forgetting the very fact that we are the system. Systems are composed of different ingredients, of individuals. And I always give this very, very simple example. Because often when I travel, many places are not that clean, and you would see, garbage and papers and plastic bottles and cans on the lawns, and I absolutely hate it. Mm-hmm. And I often say, when somebody complains about the system, imagine if we, all the people in the world, would just put garbage in the garbage bins.
Right.
That compound effect, the collective action, would absolutely change the face of our planet, let alone if we were recycling. But as you said, there has to be somebody or many people who would set the example. And I also think when it comes to teaching and teaching profession, and I strongly believe that teachers or whoever is in the education field, these people, they are just heroes. It also takes a little bit of courage to introduce something else, something new, something unusual. But once you set an example, and in many countries you would have these observation classes or experimental classes where teachers would come to visit and observe other teachers' class.
Yeah.
And if that teacher would dare to just kind of change the things and their approach a bit and start with a question, or can you imagine a school project where kids are applying Disney creative strategy? They would just simply go wild. But it is this moment where teacher is guiding a process, and by playing they would basically be learning very, very serious things that would be very applicable later on to their lives and to their jobs. It doesn't have to be very the techniques are there for teachers, for mentors, for coaches, for therapists, to kind of adjust them to different contexts and needs. So I understand that very often it can sound, okay, this is really not possible. This is too corporate world related. But when you just start thinking a bit out of the box, you can see, well, it is really, really applicable. And the great thing is when teachers move from being the center of the education process to the place of being a facilitator, a guide, the things are easier for them. And they are way more enjoyable for the children, because we see a tremendous lack of the motivation. Because with all the technology, kids are absolutely not interested in books and in facts. So they need something with more life. And this is, I believe, coaching fits very, very well. And also recently, I'm just shifting gears a bit here, but there's a lot of concerns when it comes to AI, and most teachers are so afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. But nobody is looking at the AI in a way, or rarely, I don't want to overgeneralize, this is going to help me in a way that I can do a lot of admin work that I have to do as a teacher, let's be honest. This can help me with producing hundreds and hundreds of different spreadsheets. Even lesson planning, I don't mind teachers using ChatGPT or whatever tool to plan a lesson. If they use it later, if it's a framework and guide, because AI can really serve everyone in terms of like decreasing the time and effort and energy we spend on doing things that can be do automatically and manually, and freeing up the time and space and energy to be more engaged, to be more interactive, to go an extra mile, which otherwise would not happen. So this is something new, and there's like a huge buzz across the globe, like what's gonna do to us. So if you just look at a couple of things that teachers or whomever can use, whether they are teachers, managers, university professors, doctors, I think that we live in such a great era. Like these times probably are the best. And I know that very often people think these are like the most unsecure times, but this is because we are now able to know what is happening in every single corner of the world. But if you look at the statistics, this is probably the safest times of ever. It is just the fact that we know what happened in Greenland and in wherever in real time, and that this creates like the false sense of insecurity. But I think that what we have at the moment, as nations, as generations, it's absolutely in our favor. We just need to be generally very smart how we use it.
Yeah, definitely. So picking up on this idea of artificial intelligence, what about coaching and artificial intelligence? How does the world of coaching think AI is going to change that? Because I know that there are some cases of people turning to AIs for advice and almost to fulfill the role of a coach, perhaps. What's your experience of that?
Yeah, I would say that there was a concern across the coaching industry when it comes to AI. Is it now going to replace all possible jobs? I think that it can be complementary to different professions, and it's really okay to use it. And certainly it can be helpful. But let's not forget we are humans. And I don't think that any kind of application, tool, robot can ever replace the human need for the interaction. The way I see it is really being an extra tool. Like 10 years ago, or 15, bit more, it depends. We just started using GPS and nobody was complaining about it because it didn't look that scary. It really helped us a lot. And now we cannot imagine, even in my hometown, I would use it.
Yeah.
And now it really facilitated everything, like traveling and, just moving around. And I think when it comes to AI, it just like time is needed for people to adjust and to understand what is it all about, because I believe strongly that all these fears are stemming out of lack of knowledge, because as we were saying about fear equals unknown. I see it as a great tool. The other day I was about to write something and I was very lazy to write it, and I used ChatGPT. That was maybe the third time. And of course, it could not produce what I wanted and what I needed, but it just gave me enough of, say, inspiration, a framework that was more than enough for me to then start developing what I was supposed to write. And I see AI coaches being beneficial to coaches and to clients, but just being an extra tool. Maybe for coaches themselves, if they are working with a challenging client, maybe they can be inspired or helped or support by an AI tool. For example, if you're asking, I have a client dealing this and that, what should I do? And maybe, instead of going to our books and our scripts, I could just use that tool, just kind of like, to nudge me a bit. I really see AI very positively. And as I said, I see it as tools that will free up a lot of time for us. Instead of reading a couple of books or looking in different places, I can have it all in one place. Some of my colleagues were concerned, and I just wanted to kind of like unpack the whole thing. The same goes for the medical profession. Of course, we will be having different machines and scanners, and like it will be more of automatic processes. But a lot of things will still need humans. And I think generally, as humans, what we need to do is to work on our development, and coaching is all about that. So, coaching, for example, for teachers can be applied. Okay, let's coach teachers in AI along with training them in AI. So we first understand what is the fear about and how can we shift the paradigm in our own favor. But I think AI really requires all of us to step up our game and to start learning more. Nobody is afraid of different apps any longer, right? So I see AI as just being extra level or extra few levels up to what we already have when it comes to different tools and apps and all these means that we are using nowadays. Recently, I read a quote which says, knowledge is the currency for the future. So as coaching supports and requires, it's like working on yourself in different way every single day. It doesn't have to be taking a course. It doesn't have to be reading a super informative, complex book. It can be knitting. It can be skating. It can be baking. You know, for me, knitting would be like rocket science. But it's how do we keep being better and pushing ourselves. So I think that's going to be the game with the AI. We will just need to learn more and to work on ourselves to be better, mostly on the human side of the paradigm. And this is when AI becomes our friend, our ally, not somebody or something to be afraid of.
Very wise words. I think I'm with you. I think there are lots of sort of fears about what the future will be because of these new generative AI tools. But I think we're in a position now collectively to decide how they're used and for what. So I think the kind of future of what they are and what they become to a large extent isn't just in the hands of the people who are making these tools, but in the hands of how we, the people, use them. And I think perhaps coaching is pretty safe because, as you mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation, it takes a long time to become a coach, to understand how you can actually give advice to people that is valid. And for that, I think you need to be human, surely.
Exactly.
You're helping someone with the experience of being human, and it probably doesn't make sense for a person who wants to understand how to better improve some of the aspects of their human life to get that advice from a machine, maybe.
Exactly. And you know, like if there are AI coaches, so as I said, it takes somebody, it takes a present person, and like the key characteristics of the coaches and the coaching process are being present, being there, listening to the structure. Like coaches, it will sound contradictory, but we basically do not listen to our clients and our coaches. We are listening and we are looking at the structure of the narrative. We are looking for the values. We are looking for the beliefs, because I can maybe work with a physician and he or she, they will be telling me about their job. And I'm not a consultant, I'm not expert. But what I'm picking up from that conversation are the values that they are living upon or they are trying to live upon, are their beliefs, are their fears. So these are the things that coaches would extract from a conversation and work on these. So you're right, it really takes time to become one. And as we were talking, it is like a process which requires commitment and accountability. So having an app, I'm not sure if you can be that accountable to an app, maybe to a certain degree, but it's different when you are eyes to eyes with somebody. And we are also energetic beings. So very often we are like, okay, I don't like this person's energy. With apps, it's different. Like, and I don't think that you can have such a connection with an app. Although everything is very changing and everything is very questionable, I see AI really not dehumanizing us, but rehumanizing us. As I said, freeing up the space, time, energy for different things that would otherwise be consumed and that would otherwise require human presence and efforts that can be used in a much better, more humane, more productive way. So these are my views on the AI, and like with everything, it requires time, it requires acceptance, and it requires training and knowledge, being informed. And once you have, like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, this conversation wouldn't have been possible. And
That's right.
this is AI, to be honest. This is like technology. So why be afraid? And I remembered when I was living in Brussels, I did my traineeship there, and back then State Secretary John Kerry was there, and he was describing his experience of being in Europe for the first time when he was a student. And he said that back then, if he wanted to call his parents, he needed to go to the post office and schedule a call, and it would have taken 3 days to have a time slot. And he was like, okay, and now you come to a new country, already at the airport, you have Wi-Fi, and your parents, the loved ones, they know where are you, that you are safe and sound, what are you doing. I admit that it really accelerated everything, and that we are kind of like processing things at like a crazy speed. But it really brought us much closer. And from that perspective, I really don't see AI or any other technological advancement or development like an enemy. And let's not forget, it was the people who invented that.
Yeah, it's true. Listen, Tatiana, I'm going to wind things up now because we're running out of time. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and thank you so much for sharing all of your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. The time flies, really. I enjoyed it enormously. Thanks for being such a great host, for allowing me to talk and to really asking a great question that just provided space for good interaction.
Pleasure is all mine.
Good. Thank you. Bye. Greetings from Belgrade.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher, or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more, and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
That brings us all to the end of the show. Thank you very much for all of you who were listening live, and thank you to those of you who are listening back to the recording. Thanks in particular to Andrew, Fatima and Manes, among others who were live and chatting along with me. There are Teachers Talk radio shows on all manner of different subjects all week. So please tune in or look at the recordings and listen to some of the other shows. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.